conversations that we were gonna have,
Uh-huh.
and he just tuned me out, and we just ate our foods and moved on.
Yeah, sounds like a great lunch. First off, so I don't know if he's told you this, but Alex is trying to get into the Premier League, and he's trying to pick a team.
Yeah, this was a
Um,
big part of the discussion.
yes, and his first thought was, "I'm gonna go for Tottenham," in which case I sort of, like, talked him straight. This is not a pick that you would choose if you have any sort of serious intention of anything, quite honestly. That's, what is that? That's Tottenham's like the sexy blogger pick. And then I told
I
him, yeah, just
guess.
pick a more traditional team though. Pick one with like like an actual history, a culture, a fan base that has seen their team lift something in their
Mm.
lifetime. And yeah, so then we kind of debated across different teams. Did you have any advice as to sort of what he could pick?
My main advice was not to pick United
I knew it. I knew you would tell him that.
because it's some
Uh,
dark times, and
but isn't this
the
the right
Glazers
time to get
are the
in? Like you
Glazers.
get in now and you're good. When they're
No,
when
the right time to get in is once the Glazers are out, which is
oh
probably a long way away,
yeah, that's tough.
if it's even away at all. Um, I think the funny thing is he was. I guess I don't want to spoil like who he's leaning towards right now, but obviously he's not going to go with Liverpool because he wants to have some kind of banter with you.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
fair. Yeah. He does his whole life's purpose is to create content with me, so that does make
exactly.
sense that he's not gonna support Liverpool, yeah.
So that would defeat the purpose. Um, maybe he will look at Chelsea. Uh,
It's not the right time
maybe.
to be a Chelsea fan.
I mean, hey, new ownership.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what
We'll
happens.
see if they're as
He's
generous.
obviously not going for relegation teams, uh, teams in that mix.
Everton's out, huh?
Um, Everton is unfortunately out.
Mm,
Leeds United is unfortunately out.
yeah.
But yeah, I think he's leaning one way. It's the other side of Manchester, I guess, and that would make for great content with you two for
Yeah,
sure.
I was gonna say, that sounds
The
actually not a bad
rivalry,
idea.
in terms of the content, that's probably the best choice.
Yeah, yeah. They do have
In
a
terms of a team to support, he might. I told him he might be better off picking another league, maybe not the Premier League.
damn. No, I honestly, Alex being a front runner and jumping on bandwagons, I think it actually make a lot of sense for him to be a City fan. Plus, Alex came up through generational wealth. So yeah, I think the City
Mm,
connection actually does work quite nicely for him. But listen, we're gonna talk more soccer more towards the end of the segment. I know big matchup coming up this weekend. Liverpool versus Real Madrid, speaking of history and tradition, facing off in the Champions League final, and we'll have time to discuss that. However, there's actual Raptors news for once in the offseason for the Raptors, which is that Pascal Siakam was named to the All NBA third team yesterday.
big time.
Big time, big time. So the three teams, if you haven't heard already, first team goes Giannis, goes Luca, Jokic, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum. Three foreign players, by the way. Just noting that right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
second team, Joel Embiid, John Morant, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan. And then third team, Karl Anthony Towns, LeBron James, Chris Paul, Trey Young, and Toronto's very own Pascal Siakam. Now, I have to say, Pascal did have the least votes out of anybody who actually made any of the three teams. He had seven second place votes and
We don't
42.
need to get into the details.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just saying there is a bit of a drop off. When you're looking at total points, so you get 2 points for second team, 1 point for third team, and stuff like that. 3 points for first. He had 63. The next closest was Trey Young at 110. So there is a bit of a gap. However, having said that, this is a really nice accomplishment for him. I think when you were looking at the race for All NBA and the forward positions, I think there were a couple of injuries this year, but you know based on what Pascal did to lead the Raptors into a position where they're able to finish with the fifth seed, able to finish with 48 wins. He was also remarkably healthy for the second half of the season, was able to play a lot of minutes, and also just played a lot of great basketball.
Hmm.
Vivek, were you surprised by this at all? And yeah, what did you make of the fact that Pascal has made the All NBA team for the second time now in 3 years?
Well, I will say that that new site that's been around the last couple of years, the NBA awards tracker,
Hmm.
the Excel sheet that you can find online, that kind of takes away from the suspense. So I was pretty confident that Pascal would make it. I think without that, I probably would have been wondering this whole time, can he really get ahead of Jimmy Butler? But I'm glad to see that he did. I think it's fully deserved. And you mentioned the way he carried the Raptors to that fifth seed. So much of this season, the Raptors were in that play-in tournament conversation, and especially after Fred VanVleet gets hurt, those two blowouts coming out of the All-Star break, you're wondering where things might go. And Siakam went to another level. It was almost like he took that All-Star snub personally, and obviously Scotty Barnes found another level as well. And I thought to take on the load that he did, both on the offensive end and the defensive end, to dictate games the way he did was remarkable. Uh, the best season that he's had in my books, and real leadership all around, on court, through his actions, off court, keeping in touch with the players, doing everything he could. And so I think the exciting thing for me is going forward, I do feel there is still another level for him to get to.
Hmm.
I don't think this is the end of the road as far as his development is concerned.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to get into that conversation about the next level that Pascal can get to, because once you are now in a situation where you're a regular on the All NBA teams, and look, two times in 3 years is not enough to be a regular, but we'll see. I mean, based on the way things are going, he'll probably make it again next year. There will be a conversation there in terms of what that might mean and also what the next steps are. But I wanted to sort of, I guess, stay on this team in particular and talk about the fact that, like, so Pascal made it over a guy like Jimmy Butler, as you mentioned. There was some concern potentially that Jimmy might take this spot. And honestly, Jimmy, playing for the Miami Heat, first in the Eastern Conference. The Heat don't have a single representative on the All NBA teams. What did you make of him making it over Jimmy Butler?
I thought it was the right call. I thought when you just evaluate the regular seasons, I thought that Siakam, not only did he, I think some people made the case about the games played and the minutes, but to me, that was at the bottom of the conversation. Because if you look
Mm,
at what happened since December 31st, the Raptors had an almost identical record to the Miami Heat.
yep.
Uh, Siakam's numbers were absolutely outrageous. Um, and he during the regular season he shot the three better than Jimmy Butler as well. And the thing that stood out to me is you look at the mid range numbers and the way they break it down on Basketball Reference. Uh, in terms of the ranges, the 3 to 10 foot range, the 10 to 16, 16 to 3 point. He was better than Jimmy Butler in that regard too.
Hmm. Interesting.
And so I think that's where tip the scales towards Pascal,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I say it was absolutely deserved.
Yeah. I agree with you on that front. I mean, look, I thought
There's
Jimmy.
probably a bigger case for Jimmy over LeBron than there is for Pascal.
Yeah, well, I mean, the LeBron case is a little difficult because from a lot of the conversations that I heard around why LeBron deserved to make it, a lot of it was it's LeBron, which I mean, like you gotta like do a little bit more work than that. His numbers are obviously tremendous. He was not the reason why the Lakers fell so short of expectations. However, he really didn't play like any defense in like, and I trust
Yep.
me, the Lakers were on TV like every day, so it's not like no one can
Hmm.
really say I didn't watch the Lakers. You were forced to watch the Lakers. Okay, um, he didn't play defense. His teams were so bitterly uncompetitive towards the end. There was if you could feel like the annoyance and the disdain he had for some of his teammates at certain points, and yeah, that one is interesting to me. And of course, he also didn't play the whole season. But yeah, I mean, speaking to Jimmy versus Pascal, like Pascal plays 11 more games than Jimmy. Pascal was more efficient from both the field and like 2 point range and also 3 point range. Jimmy gets to the free throw line more often and shoots it better there. But Pascal rebounded the ball better than him. Assists were basically that's the same 5.5 per game for Jimmy, 5.3 for Pascal. Obviously, they're both really good defensively. If I had to take my pick, I'd still take Jimmy over Pascal defensively, but both guys are really good defensively. And as you mentioned, after Pascal recovered from the shoulder surgery, and when you're looking at, not just coming back to play, which for him happened in November, but him getting fully in shape to, be able to perform at his best level, from the start of 2020 or 2020,
Hmm.
2022 onward, Pascal Siakam averaged 24 points, 9 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game on 50% shooting from the field and 37% shooting from three. Those are incredible numbers. And it does kind of, beg the question, like, look, what else can Pascal do to sort of elevate his status in the game? Because when you're already in the all NBA teams, the next goal is sort of like, can you make it to not just a second in the first team, but like, can you make it to an MVP conversation? Because when you're looking at the MVP conversation, like obviously that's going to include pretty much everybody that's in the first and second teams. So my question is, can Pascal Siakam get to that level with his game, and what he might need to do to get to that level?
Yeah, I think that's the next step to just continue to expand his range. So
Okay.
going back to the breakdown, right? Field goal percentage by areas of the floor. That 3 to 10 foot range really became a sweet spot for Pascal. He shot 50% from the field in that area. And so while we're on the subject, Jimmy Butler, that same range shot 41.5%.
Mm,
So Pascal was almost 10% better than Jimmy in that area. And they both take approximately a third of their shots from there.
right.
So the bread and butter is there. We know that. What happens now when you go to 10 to 16 feet? Pascal is at 45%, which is solid. That is a solid mark. But the closer you can get to 50, even better. So I think that's another sweet spot that he can establish where, again, if teams are packing the paint, especially in the postseason, if he has that comfort to just rise up immediately, then that's another option that you take away from a defense. The other part of it, to me, is the willingness to shoot off the dribble. And so if he develops his handle to a point where he can either take that one hard dribble and pull up, or, he can accelerate and stop on a dime. I think those are the two big things where he could really level up, especially if it comes in terms of the hard dribble pull up, especially if it comes from three. It's going to be an incredible shot for him. Not non-corner threes this season, he shot 32%. The season before he was at 30%.
Mm,
The 2019-20 season, he was at 36%. So that's a healthy
mm.
number. If he can get to that 36% number again, then I think we're inching closer towards that fringe MVP conversation.
Yeah. And listen, I think, mm, I mean, if we're going to be completely realistic about it, it's very hard to envision him like in that firm contention for MVP, because like you look at the numbers
Yeah.
like of a Joel Embiid, of a Jokic, of a Giannis. Like these guys are giving you 30 points, probably like 12 rebounds, like 7, 8
Hmm.
assists. Like uh,
That's why I said fringe.
they play the two. They're so impactful on both ends of the floor. Like there is a level. Like I'm going to be very clear about this, that I'm not saying that Pascal is going to jump to winning MVP next year, but being in that conversation for MVP, I think is something that is within reach for him, right? Because when you're looking at a
Yep.
conversation of like Devin Booker's in the MVP conversation, DeMar DeRozan was in the MVP conversation for a lot of the year. I don't fully see a reason why he couldn't get there. And I think, look, the case there is obviously you got his own individual numbers, his own individual play, and then also his team's record, right? And that's where for
Yep.
me, it's like, okay, obviously the better the Raptors do, the better Pascal is going to do. And of course, Pascal doing well obviously influences the Raptors winning. But, you look at, again, going back to the start of 2022, the Raptors had the sixth best record in the league, right? Out of all the teams in the Eastern Conference, the Raptors were second in the wins behind only Boston. And Boston had like one of the best half seasons ever. And you
Hmm.
see where they are right now in the conference finals. 2 wins away from making it to the finals. Although we'll see if that happens. Um, if that trend holds true all season, I think again, like you'll probably see more of this talk for Pascal Siakam, not just from this propaganda program, which again, propaganda works, people. But like, I think you'll probably see it more nationally as well, and I think that's where if he incorporates a lot of the elements that you mentioned that you talked about there, if you look at him expanding his range. And even like in terms of expanding his range, the interesting thing is like, so Pascal did take a fair number of pull-ups this season, right? It's not like he wasn't like, it's not like he wasn't taking pull-up jumpers. He was just almost exclusively taking them from 2 rather than from 3.
Right.
You look at his 2-point pull-ups this season, he took 308 of them, hit 41%, which is a decent mark. But you compare that to only 35 pull-up threes, right? You're looking at essentially a 10-to-1 ratio of pull-up 2s to pull-up 3s. If you can get that mix closer to even, like 150 pull-up mid-range jumpers and 150 pull-up 3s, you're probably going to see a lot of increase in just scoring, just obviously based on the fact that there's an extra point. But you're probably also going to see an overall rise in his true shooting percentage as well. And I think when you get to the situation where, like, let's say Pascal can average like 26, 27 points in a season, which I don't see why he couldn't, and the Raptors are, 5th or 6th in terms of the record in the overall league, naturally he would make himself into that conversation. So I'm just trying to say it's not too far out. And if you're looking at sort of like creating goals for next season, it's not a unattainable goal for Pascal to crack that MVP conversation.
Yeah, I don't think so. And again, as long as we're being clear that it's in that fringe MVP conversation, um, the same way, I would probably set, uh, the ultimate goal for Scotty next season is maybe being in a fringe all-star conversation,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So it's not necessarily, hey, this has to happen,
Yeah.
but it's just like, hey, every time there's an all-star team announced, there's probably 4 or 5 guys you're talking about that got snubbed or that were at least you would consider to be playing at an all-star level. And it's like, hey, can you challenge Scotty to get to that level now?
Right.
Um, and it's not a disappointment by any means if it doesn't happen. And so, yeah, it's just laying out the next challenge because of what they've accomplished. And I think with Siakam, the other way I look at it too is the developing from the standpoint of what the team needs. And of course, we know the biggest need for this team is 3-point shooting.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you look at the way these playoffs are playing out right now, and the teams that seem to be going the furthest are the ones that you look down the roster and it's like they have 6, 7, 8 guys that come in and have no issues putting up 4 or 5 threes a game
Yeah.
or even more. You got a Grant Williams throwing up 18 attempts in a closeout game, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so,
The game's gone,
uh,
bro. The game's gone when Grant Williams takes 18 threes in a game 7, bro. The game is gone.
and so
Uh,
I think if you're Pascal and you're looking at the team and saying, okay, you can rely on Fred, you can rely on Gary, you can rely on OG to get those 3-point shots up
mhm.
uh, with volume and consistency in terms of efficiency. Maybe Precious Achua continues from where he was after the All-Star break, and so now you've added a fourth guy that you can maybe depend on. How do we get to 5, 6, 7? Because
Right.
that's where the league kind of is, and it's like, hey, maybe I can be one of those guys.
Okay. Well, listen, the MVP conversation is already something that is probably going to turn a lot of heads. So let me just add one more. Um, does Pascal Siakam have a chance to overtake Kyle as the best Raptor? Not next season, not even the season afterwards. But, and I know it's blasphemous. No, obviously Kyle is, undisputed. Well, not undisputed. I mean, mostly undisputed, I would say.
Currently undisputed GOAT.
Currently undisputed
Groat.
Raptors GOAT. That's right. But can Pascal overtake him down the line? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because obviously, so now Pascal's made All NBA second team. He's made All NBA third team. In terms of Raptors history, he joins Vince Carter, who made the third team in 1999, made the second team in 2000, and DeMar DeRozan, who made third team in 2017 and second team in 2018. The other players on the Raptors who have been named to the All-NBA teams, Chris Bosh did it in 2007, the second team. Kawhi did it in 2019, the second team. And then Kyle did it, third team, 2016. Obviously, there's other factors that go into play. There's longevity. There is, people contributing to championships. There's players who have changed the culture. There's players who have made tons of all-star games that it's still more than Pascal. But if Pascal's on the Raptors and if he remains healthy and at this level for 4 or 5 more years, like, are we not going to have that conversation as well?
I think Siakam has the potential. I think for me, I would look at where does he play the rest of his prime in today's day and age where things change once you're past that peak and trades get made and all of that.
Okay.
Players have different desires. I think if it so happens that he ends up on another team post his prime, then it is what it is. But say he plays out his next contract and he's put in, at this point it's at 6. If it gets to 10 plus, and he's got several more all-stars to his name, got more all NBA selections, maybe there's an all defense in him as well. I think you have to have the conversation because I think what's beautiful about Pascal is he represents so much of what the Raptors have been in this modern era. A guy who was drafted, late in the first round, goes to the G League, finds a way to be successful there, wins the G League Finals MVP, wins the G League championship, then comes up is the most improved player. The Raptors organization are all about development, so he represents that in that way. Goes and wins a championship and is the second leading scorer on the team behind Kawhi Leonard. Then he's taken on this challenge of being the guy, and if he can continue to take this franchise forward, ultimately it'll be defined by playoff success. Can you get to the Eastern Conference Finals? Can you get to the NBA Finals? Those are the things that will probably tip the scales ultimately. But I think the one thing that you would have said with Kyle that should apply to Siakam going forward is, yeah, obviously winning the championship elevated Kyle's legacy, but you didn't necessarily need that to appreciate everything that Kyle brings to the table. And I think with this version of Pascal, we want to see him make the Eastern Conference Finals. We want to see him go as deep as he can in the playoffs. But I don't think winning or not winning a championship as a Raptor should ultimately define, as the guy, should ultimately define where he ranks and how much we appreciate him.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. I mean, even with when Kyle, I mean, like, I think the championship helped, like, I mean, honestly, like, I would have had him already at that level as the greatest Raptor before the championship, but the championship just, like, is unassailable. But, like, Pascal has he contributed just as much to that championship as Kyle did, And when we look back at it, again, like, you would need a lot more longevity.
Neither of them was the guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Kawhi's not the greatest Raptor. Although some people still say Kawhi's the greatest Raptor, which is, like, he had the greatest season for the Toronto Raptors, but he had one season, man. Like, that you can't you can't immediately vaunt. He might be the best player the Raptors ever had. I'm cool with that being said. I think that's true as well, but
right.
Greatest, I think you need some longevity, you need some part in building that program, and I think that's also where Kyle really helped establish, like, that culture of winning. And I think Pascal probably doesn't have that benefit because with the time that Pascal took over, the Raptors had already essentially corrected themselves as a franchise, whereas when Kyle took over, obviously the Raptors were basically Sacramento East. So there is that benefit, but at the same time, like, again, this is looking 4 or 5 years down the line, but if he keeps this up, like, I think there's a real chance for him to get to that level, which is kind of incredible to say as a Raptor fan. All right, lastly, before you go, big game coming up this weekend, Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern at the Stade de France. Liverpool, 6 times champions of Europe, Real Madrid, 13 times champions of Europe, a rematch of 2018, where famously Mo Salah got a dirty play. Who was it? Ramos broke the code.
Sergio Ramos.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
broke the code, as Steve Kerr would say. He broke the code. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so Mo wasn't able to play. Also, Liverpool had Loris Karius in net and a few uh, very
Blunders.
more than a few. Yeah, some real bad goalkeeping blunders. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a different matchup, but also at the same time, it's a very familiar matchup. So, Vivek, as an unbiased observer of the game, as someone who truly loves this game, how do you see this game coming out?
I think Liverpool have the better team or can feel the better 11,
Okay,
but Real Madrid just seem like a team of destiny right now. You look at the comebacks that they've had.
three straight
Uh,
rounds.
yeah, and especially this last one against Man City to pull it off the way they did
Uh huh.
was incredible.
Yep.
And so I think it would be very difficult to bet against them, but I will pick. I think I said this earlier. I will pick Liverpool to get their revenge for that previous Champions League final. I think especially after the final day of the Premier League going down the way that it did, they will have that extra motivation to get
Mm.
the job done. And yeah, I would expect them to win it and have a non-league treble.
Okay. All right. Just have to sneak that in there. I get it. It's all good. Uh, yeah, it's
Just
okay. United
just
fans holding on to former
explaining the
glory.
difference.
I get it, man. Um, how do you
That's all I
think?
got.
How do you think? I mean, I know how Liverpool is going to play. Like they literally approach every game the exact same way. They're going to press you high. They're going to throw the wingbacks up, essentially to be like almost on the level of their actual wingers. How do you see Real Madrid sort of playing this? Because my concern is like they could be outplayed for 70, 75 minutes in a match and then
Hmm.
make a few subs and then they just completely change the game. We've seen that literally the last three rounds against Chelsea, against PSG, and against City as well. So how do you envision Real Madrid playing it? Because if I were them, I would sort of almost play counterattack. And then, of course, when there is a turnover in play the ball in behind, especially on the right side. Trent will probably be very far up the field. We'll see if Henderson is able to get over and cover. But if it's Henderson versus Vinicius Jr. or anything like that, it's a little scary for me. So how do you envision Real Madrid sort of strategizing for this game?
I think the main thing for them is they will believe that Modric should be able to unlock the Liverpool defense, right? I think there are those balls in behind that Liverpool, they will look to play that offside trap and gamble with it a little bit.
Hmm.
Um,
A,
but I
a
think
lot, you
Modric
mean? A
is,
lot. That's
yeah,
that's that's
well, yeah,
mainly our defensive strategy. And if we do get beat on
exactly,
that trap, we're just relying on Virgil to run back with his speed. And
exactly,
or Allison is very good at saving one-on-one opportunities. Although to be honest,
yeah.
against Benzema, I don't want to take that chance, man.
Right, and that's gonna be such an intriguing part of this matchup, right?
Yeah.
Van Dijk versus Benzema. Just to watch those two guys go at it, uh, will be incredible. So I think so much of what Klopp's planning will be about is Modric,
Mm,
because he is the key to unlocking those balls in behind. And once if you can get Vinny Jr. on the run, uh,
scary.
especially, if it's
Very scary,
Trent
man.
Alexander-Arnold trying to keep up with him, then that's gonna be a problem. So, I think that's gonna be the key. I'll be watching that left side. Modric will be watching that left side, and, uh, if they can pick those opportunities, then that's Real Madrid's key to success. Liverpool, like you said, they're gonna press high, and they're gonna try and assert their dominance, and I think Real will be comfortable with that. That's probably another important thing too, is like Real Madrid will be comfortable playing against that and trying to, break the press and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, we saw them do it against City as well.
Yep.
So this is a really scary opponent, but as Mo Salah said before the game was the second leg between City and Real Madrid, he said, he wants to see Real Madrid because he wants the rematch, and I think I want to as well. Hopefully, it's going to go well for Liverpool. I am cautiously optimistic that they will win. But look, listen, both teams are dealing with heartbreak. Obviously Liverpool missing out on the league by 1 point once again to City. But on Madrid's side, they missed out on Mbappe, who man, that contract is incredible. By the way, a $200 million signing bonus is incredible, man.
And he gets to decide everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's
He's
the
gonna
Brooklyn
pick the new
Nets.
manager.
Yo, the PSG is the Brooklyn Nets, man.
That is a perfect analogy. That is just
Uh,
pure chaos, big names
yep.
getting their way, doing as they please. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then, in a year we'll probably have Mbappe wanting out.
Damn. Okay. That's gonna be. You know what's gonna be interesting because we are gonna talk about the Brooklyn Nets on the other side of this break. But Vivek, appreciate you for coming on, for talking about Pascal, for talking about soccer as always. And yeah, I'll call you again next week. Hopefully, with a very celebratory tone.
I like it. Appreciate you, Will.
All right, I think that's a good spot for us to take a break. I'm your host, William Lou, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I'm your host, Wim Lou. And for the second segment, I am joined by the Scores, Joe Wolfon. Wolfon, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
I am doing well. I am, I'm reeling a little bit. So yesterday after work, I decided to play in my intramural soccer league. We were short on bodies. We didn't have our usual substitutes, so I played the whole match for an hour, which honestly wasn't super exhausting. But then afterwards, I decided to go play in a pickup basketball run for about another 2 hours. And this morning when I woke up, I was like, damn, these legs don't work the way they used to. So I'm a little sore is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're what, like 7, 8 years younger than I am, so
Yeah, but
I feel no sympathy for your young legs.
What are you talking about, bro? You are like, first off, you still look 25. And second of all, you still move like you're 25, man. You're like one of the most active. I just imagine like that's your usual day to day, at least pre-baby. You know, it was just like, you know, don't act like I didn't have you out on the ultimate frisbee team and you weren't one of the best runners there.
Yeah, that was really my only skill in ultimate was just run. I mean, I guess that's what's great about ultimate is like you can get by just by running a lot and running fast. So
absolutely. All right. Well, we have now talked about lots of different sports that aren't necessarily basketball so far. So let's actually focus on the basketball portion of this. So look, I was thinking about what to talk about, and this is one of those days where a lot of news just kind of falls into your lap. So first half, we talked about all NBA selections with Pascal Siakam. My only question is, okay, so Wolfon, you're a Raptor fan too, but like, you know, you cover the whole league, you know, for the Score. And did you have any thoughts about Pascal making it over Jimmy Butler?
I think like, you know, regular season stack up their production next to each other. If actually, how many more minutes did Pascal play in the end? Like, I'm not entirely sure how close that wound up being, but
okay, so Pascal played 2,578 minutes.
Okay,
and Jimmy Butler for the Miami Heat played 1,931. So we're looking at an additional 600 minutes.
Yeah, that's like a very significant gap.
Yeah,
so I think if you take that into account, it's totally reasonable for the regular season to have Pascal on there ahead of him. I mean, you know, this always happens where the postseason kind of changes people's perspective and changes the narrative a little bit, but that's not when the voting for these things happens.
Mm-hmm.
So to incorporate playoff production is pointless. Like, yeah, Butler has been incredible in the playoffs, you know, up until the last couple of games, but it's just, I mean, you strip that away, and I think, yeah, I'm totally fine with Pascal making it over him. I think, you know, you really could have made a case for any two of Pascal, Jimmy, or LeBron, I think, for that last third team forward spot. So I don't think I would have been aggrieved either if like Jimmy had made it and Pascal hadn't. I think it was more or less splitting hairs between all of those guys. And I'm really happy for Pascal that he made it. Like the rare, you know, non-all-star to make it to all NBA, right?
That's right.
And this is why, like, I'm not a person who gets super up in arms about all-star selections, because ultimately I think the all NBA thing is way more important if we're talking about whether it's legacy or just sort of telling the story of a particular season. That's the one that takes the whole season into account, whereas all-star voting happens, you know, halfway into the season. So if, like Pascal, you either missed a bunch of time at the start of the season or took a little while to get going, then you're not necessarily going to be rewarded for like the whole body of work in a particular campaign. But if you know, take stock at the end of the season and that player is deemed to have been one of the 15 best in the league, then, you know, that to me means a whole lot more than an all-star selection. So that's a huge honor for him and reflective of a great bounce back season after a bit of a down year last year.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah, all-star is just the first half of the season, as you mentioned, and also it's a bit of a popularity contest because Andrew Wiggins started the game this year because he had a big fan from a K-pop star, which is like, okay, that's cool, but like, what are we doing, man?
Yeah. Well, by the way, so what's I think Vince made 2 all NBA teams with the Raptors, right? But I think
Yes.
that might have been the only other guy to make or I guess DeMar also made 2.
Yeah. So right now they're actually so both of them made a third team and a second team, and now Pascal's made a second team and a third team. So like, um, I don't know, one more and Pascal will be clear cut number one in terms of just at least all NBA selections. Which again, you might look back on this conversation 4 or 5 years from now and say, well, maybe Pascal's in that conversation to be the greatest Raptor of all time. I think he would need more years on it for sure, and to accomplish a few more things. But I don't know. He has a good chance, and good for him. He's also a very decorated player too. One most improved player as well back in 2019. So moving from the vibes that are Pascal Siakam, which are always very positive, to the Brooklyn Nets, which are pretty much the exact opposite. So it's funny thinking back on this season how much sort of attention and thought was paid to the Nets. I know, I don't know how much on Pound the Rock you guys discussed the Nets on a day-to-day basis, but it definitely came up, a ton because they were a very, very topical team this year. There was a lot of like, oh my God, you don't want to see the Brooklyn Nets in the play-in game, and then oh my God, you don't want to see Brooklyn Nets if you're the first or the second seed in the Eastern Conference, and then of course they got swept. Look, they were competitive against a really, really good Boston team. But look, a sweep is still a sweep. And now the news out of Brooklyn, this is coming from Kristen Winfield of the New York Daily News, is two things. Number one, the Brooklyn Nets are hesitant to sign Kyrie Irving long-term, for reasons that should be fairly obvious as to why they would have some second thoughts in terms of signing him up to like a 5-year deal. And because they're hesitant to sign Kyrie long-term, Kevin Durant has now not spoken to the front office all summer. So, Wolfon, loved your thoughts on the Nets and just how much of a mess they are. Should they re-sign Kyrie just to appease, KD? Should they re-sign Kyrie just because that's their best move? Like,
Yes.
what do you do?
Yes, 100%. That's their best and only move. Like this is what they got themselves into. They knew what they were getting themselves into.
Did they,
I
though?
mean, maybe
Did they?
not in terms they didn't know they were getting themselves into a global pandemic
Uh-huh.
against which Kyrie Irving was going to be unwilling to vaccinate himself. Like that, you could say, okay, they didn't sign up for that.
Mm.
But at the same time, like Kyrie comes with baggage. Like whether it's been his checkered injury history or, his history of, I guess I would have to go back and say, I don't know if before last season there were any other instances of him sort of like taking time off for personal reasons, which, I have no issue with that whatsoever. Like if you need, a mental health break, then you need a mental health break. That's fine. But if you are the team that employs him, like you have to be aware of that stuff and recognize that if you're signing him, that's a risk. And it was like a risk that the Nets were more than willing to take because it meant getting not only Kyrie Irving, an extraordinarily talented player, but also getting Kevin Durant, who, on his best days can look like the best player alive. And that's like, I just don't understand what they would imagine their alternative to be in this situation, because it's not like, you let Kyrie walk and then you have all this cap space to work with and you can go out and sign somebody else to replace him. I mean, first of all, about his personal relationship with KD and how Durant might feel about that, but also it's just about cap mechanics. Like they're not an under the cap team and they're not going to be an under the cap team even if they let Kyrie go. So they're sort of like penned in a way. Like they have to use Kyrie's bird rights effectively to just like blow past the cap and bring him back because there's no other way to replace him. And just because it's, again, like you can go back to whatever it was 3 years ago now. Like I can't believe it's been that long, but that was the decision they made. These were the two guys that they sort of tethered their fortunes to. And then obviously, they doubled down by putting a lot of stuff on the table to go and get James Harden. And we know how that, played out for them. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a complete loss there. Like they do have Ben Simmons, who I know we haven't seen him play in a really long time. I know there are all these questions about him physically and mentally. And I don't know what the future is going to hold for Ben Simmons, but I also do know that I've seen Ben Simmons play at an extremely high level.
Yeah.
I know that in theory, at least, he could be a really good on-court fit with this team. And I think he helps them in the area that they need help in most. So I think they can look at that and be like, look, if things, if we get a full season with our best players where, whether it's a relaxing vaccine mandates, like Kyrie can play a full season, like everybody's sort of on the same page and they're not doing this dance where, every night they show up and there's kind of a different team with a different identity on the court.
Mm-hmm.
They can have a little bit more connectivity and consistency and synergy next season. Like this could be a really good team. And I just don't, again, I like just go back to what's the alternative here. Like I understand all the risks and all the reasons they would not want to commit to Kyrie long term. I just don't think that they have another option.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Which look, I would feel queasy about signing a check that says Kyrie Irving $170 million. I would, but I mean, like when he does play, he is phenomenal. Like you can't overlook this fact. I think there's obviously so much conversation about everything else around Kyrie, but like, I mean, the 3 years he's played for Brooklyn, man, 27 points per game in all 3 seasons. Last year he was 51% from the field, 40% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line on 27.4 points per game. This is his yeah, I mean, that was last season for Kyrie. Obviously, this season he wasn't available as much, but still quite efficient in the times that he played. And in terms of skill wise, he is still like one of the most skilled players in the game. It's just making sure he's available, and I guess they want to get some buy-in from him and all this other stuff. I think, look, ultimately they will sort of be okay, and it kind of made me think about like the conversation in the Eastern Conference, like who is going to be at the top of the East next season. And, I think what you're looking at the playoffs right now, to me, it seems pretty clear that Boston is the best team in the Eastern Conference as things stand. We'll see if there's substantial movement in the Eastern Conference. I don't actually anticipate too much of a busy offseason. I don't know about you, Wolfon. So I actually kind of think the teams are going to mostly stay the same. I think Harden's going to stay in Philly. I think that Kyrie is going to stay in Brooklyn. And if so, like, what do you foresee as the top 4 in the Eastern Conference next season? And out of those top 4, which ones are definitively better than the Raptors?
Yeah, I kind of think it's like Bucks and Celtics are the teams that I would pencil in as like surefire contenders right now.
Okay.
And they might be the only two. I feel like the other teams are all sort of beholden to some variable or some wild card factor or other. So if I'm rounding out the top 4, I think that I would still put the Sixers there, even though there's so much uncertainty with the Harden situation. Not only whether he's going to be there, I agree with you. I think he's back. I think, for their sake, I would hope that he just opts in because they can kick the can down the road another year, like see how he looks next season, another year removed from that hamstring injury, and maybe make a more clear-eyed decision about whether they want to lock him into, another 5-year contract or something like that. I think that would be really beneficial to them if he ultimately does opt in. But I think one way or another, he'll be back. And how he plays next year is going to have a lot to say about how the Eastern Conference looks. But even then, even if they get the Harden that they got this season, I think, with another year of development for Maxey, hopefully, they spend the offseason kind of filling out that roster on the margins, like bolstering their bench, finding a serviceable backup big man, or I don't know, developing Paul Reed, I guess, to be that backup big man. I just think Embiid is so good. And I'm really high on Maxey as well. So I think that would be a top 4 team. And then it's kind of between Brooklyn and Miami. And yeah, Miami's had a great season. I mean, look, they're 2 wins away from the finals right now. But I think there are big question marks with that team too, just in terms of like the age.
They're old.
They're
real old. Yeah.
Like, obviously, like Lowry, we've seen even before this injury kind of derailed him in the playoffs. Like he was not the same guy this season that he has been, in the last few. Like I think he was still great and did all the little, sort of Lowry things to gain advantages and help his team win games. Like, he's fantastic, but he's just not the same guy. Like, he doesn't really get to the rim anymore. He doesn't get to the free throw line as much. His jump shot is not where it was. And I think defensively, he's also taken like a couple of steps back from where he was at his peak. So I think that's a concern. I think Butler is still playing, arguably like as well as he's ever played, but he's got a lot of miles on his body and is on the wrong side of 30. And then PJ Tucker has been a huge part of their success and had, I think, probably the best season of his career this year at, whatever it is, 36 or 37. Can they expect that to continue for him? Like, of their core pieces, it's really just Bam and Hero who are on the younger side and who you could expect to either like sustain their level of play or get better next season. And I think that would give me some pause. So I think, like, I will grant that the Heat probably have a higher floor than the Nets do, but I think the Nets have like a considerably higher ceiling. So I would put the Nets as like that fourth team if we're picking a top four for next year.
Okay. So the Raptors are going to get the fifth seed again? I guess. I mean, honestly, like, I agree with most of what you're saying. And I think that, like a fully healthy Eastern Conference is going to be extremely tough. It was already really tough this year. Brooklyn had a very strange year. Hopefully, for them, if they can get everything right, obviously the talent speaks for itself. It's going to be a little tough for the Raptors to sort of make that next jump. But then again, I think about it and I'm like, well, second half of the season, the Raptors really had more wins of anybody in the Eastern Conference other than Boston. And if that continues for the whole year, like we're just talking about regular season success, I still do feel pretty good about the Raptors' chances. But the East is quite formidable. And
I mean, so I was just saying, like, who will the four best teams be? Not necessarily what will the regular season standings say. And I think there's a very easy case to make that the Raptors can wind up as a top four seed.
Right.
Because I mean, if they approach the regular season the way they approached this regular season, where they really prioritized and went all out to win as many regular season games as they could and played their best players, close to 40 minutes a game, then I mean, I think they could very well wind up in that same place. But I don't know if I can see them actually being one of the four best teams in the conference next season. It's possible. I think it would require like a pretty significant second-year leap from Scotty Barnes, which again is like on the table.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's sort of what it hinges on. I don't know. I mean, maybe you have a different take on that. Like, I think they also need more guard depth, frankly. But what do you think needs to happen for them to make that jump?
Honestly, Wolfon, we're going to have you on another time to continue this conversation because unfortunately this is live radio and I have to cut you off. So I'm sorry, my friend. But I do agree with most of what you said there. But that does it for us today. I'm your host, Mahmoud. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Thanks to my guests, Vivek Jacob and Joe Wolfon, our board producer, Derek Bindeo, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping us with the YouTube stream. Talk to you tomorrow.